Unity's Matchmaker makes it simple for us to group players together into matches. You can define matchmaking rules and match players together based on skill, number of hours played, game mode and more. It also handles server allocation and joining, so there is no need to input IP or port of the server. I'm continuing with the project that we set up in the last tutorial about dedicated server hosting using multiplay, and we can do our classic setup, so go to the package manager, hit the plus icon, add package by name and write com.unity.services.matchmaker. Once we have the package installed, we should also make sure that our project is connected to a Unity ID, so you can go to Edit, Project Settings, Services, and just check that your Unity project is linked with a Unity ID. And as always, the next step is to go to your internet browser and search for Unity Cloud. Open the first link and sign in. Then you can select your project, which mine is the netcode for game objects, go to the products section, and as you scroll down, you should find Matchmaker, so we can just launch it. And again, we have this simple setup guide, so in the integration, we say that we are using Unity, we can use the SDK, and it's going to tell us that again we should install the package, make sure that the Unity is connected with a Unity ID, and so on. So we have already done all of that stuff, and the next thing we can do is create a queue. As it is saying here, queues are groups of tickets within Matchmaker. What is a ticket? When a player wants to join a game, he is sending a ticket. So queues can be useful if you have different game modes such as deathmatch, capture the flag, or you have different platforms on which you can play the game such as Xbox, PC, mobile and so on. We can create queue, and for now I will be creating just one, so I can call it my queue. The maximum players on a ticket is that if you would have a lobby and you would connect with other players, then you can join into the same match with them, so I can do for example 4. Now we can create a pool under the queue where we will actually be able to define all different match rules, such as the teams. We can also do skill-based matchmaking, we can maybe group players based on their latency, packet loss, and pretty much everything you can imagine. So create pool, give it some name, select the queue, then you can also select the pool type, but right now because we have just one, it is automatically the default pool, and we can hit next. To integrate Matchmaker, you need to already be using multiplay, which is what we have set up in the last tutorial, so here you can select all of this stuff for the dedicated servers. And here is the fun part where you can actually define all different rules that will define which players will be matched together. As you may notice, I called this pool easy mode, so I will be also creating a second pool hard mode, which will be matching the players based on the mode that they select. I would also recommend you to enable backfill, which means that the players will be able to connect into the game even if the game has already started. Then we can define some teams, but right now as my games is cooperation, I will just call the team all. Then we have the team count, which I will leave just on 1 and 1, because the team all shouldn't be there twice, rather just once. Then we can also define the player count, so ideally we would do like 4 and 4, which would mean that the matchmaker would always try to fill in the match with as many players as it can. But what if there is just one player who wants to play the game? Then he would not be able to join a match. So for this we can use relaxations. This means that after some time it will decrease the minimum player count value so that the player will also be able to join in single player. So let's say that after 5 seconds the minimum values for the player should be just 3, after 10 seconds we can do 2, and maybe after 15 seconds we can make it that just one player can join a server. But for simplicity I will delete all of these and just leave it on minimum 1 and maximum 4. And here comes the fun part where you could actually define your own custom rules for the team, so for the team all, or you could define rules for the match. So for the team rules, we could match the players based on skill. We can say that this rule should pass, and that the difference between the skill in all players, which is where you can actually pass our own data, then the data path, which is just the name of the variable, so we can do skill, and we want to make sure that the skill difference of all players in the team all must be less than, let's say, 200. And like this, we could also match the players based on for how many hours they have played the game, based on their latency and stuff like that. But for simplicity, I will delete the skill matchmaking for now and just create the pool. It is also suggesting you to create an additional pool, which for us will be the hard mode, so again create an additional pool. And now, as the easy mode is already marked as default pool, we have to mark this one as pool with filters. Again, fill in all of the multiplayer related stuff. And this part is only accessible to the additional pools with pool filters. So here we can say that the game mode should be equal to hard. So now as we have two pools, first it is going to go into the hard pool, check if the game mode is equal to hard. If it is, it's going to match the player into the hard pool. If it is not, it will just put him to the default pool, which is the easy one. And I set up the rules for the hard pool the same way as for the easy pool. So I have enabled backfill, I have just created one team and said that there should be minimum 1 player and maximum 4. And this is all for the setup of the matchmaker in Unity Cloud. Now we can go back to Unity and have fun with some coding, but before that I will create a simple UI. This UI is really simple, we can just select the difficulty, which is either the easy mode or the hard mode, and hit play. I will also create new script which will be for the matchmaking manager. So we have the matchmaking manager script on an object in our scene, and make sure that you are still using the multiplay manager, because for the matchmaker to work we need to have enabled multiplay. I have just a simple public function that's going to be called when we click the button to join the game. So back in Unity we can select the button and just assign the matchmaking manager and select the function which is client join. First we'll need to create the ticket in the matchmaker, so we needed to add using Unity Services Matchmaker and Unity Services Matchmaker.models. Because the function to create the ticket is asynchronous, we are using the await keyword so that our game doesn't freeze, and for this the function has to be async. So we are accessing the matchmaker service because it is a singleton, we need to grab the instance, and then on it we can call the function which is going to return us the create ticket response. You can see that this function needs two parameters, one is list of the players and second one is the create ticket options, so let's create it. Creating the ticket options is really simple, just do new create ticket options. Then we need to input name of the queue, which for me is the my queue. Then I'm creating a list of the players that are on the one ticket, so in case that you would have a lobby, you would probably want to send in more players, but in my case I'm just sending the player ID, which is the current player playing the game. To grab the player ID, we need to access the authentication service, so I needed to add using Unity Services Authentication. And as we are creating the ticket options, you may notice that we can also pass in some attributes, which will then be used in the filters of the pools. So for us this is pretty useful, because using the filters, we are deciding if the player should be in the hard mode or the easy one. We have a variable for the dropdown, and as you can see, all of the attributes are stored in a dictionary with key of string and object, so I'm just creating that. And here it is important that the string key is called exactly how we have defined it in the Unity Cloud. So if I go to the hard mode pool that we have under my queue and go to the filters, you can see that I called it exactly game mode. So back in the script, I'm saying that game mode is, and I'm then taking it from the dropdown. And make sure that the options in the dropdown are the exact same that you have again defined in here, so in my case it should be hard. And as we are using the list of the players, it may be giving you an error because other script in Unity may be called exactly player, so just make sure that if you have some player controller, you just rename the script from player to, let's say, player controller. And when creating the player list that is trying to join, you can also pass in some custom data, so for us it could be the skill, so I would suggest you to create a custom class, where right now I have just defined the skill level, which then you would also need to reference in Unity Cloud in the matchmaker. And then when we are creating the player, I'm not only inputting the player ID, but also the skill level, which I'm inputting into the player custom data. But for now we are trying to match players only based on the hard mode or the easy mode, so I will just delete this part for now. After the matchmaker service has successfully created the ticket async, we should also store its ID, so I have a private string variable for the current ticket, which I'm then storing into a variable based on the ID that we get from the create ticket response. After we have created the ticket, we will need to be constantly checking the matchmaker service and asking it if the ticket has been successful or not. And you need to check for it every second, as the documentation is saying. We'll be running all of this inside a while loop so that we can be constantly checking for the ticket status response. To wait 1 second before it checks again, we are using the await task.delay with 1000 milliseconds, so for that I needed to add using system.threading.tasks. So we'll be constantly checking for the ticket status response, again accessing the matchmaker service and trying to get the ticket async based on the ID. If you take a look inside the ticket status response class, you can see that it has a public variable of type, so we need to check if the type is equal to the multiplay assignment, because this is the type from which we then can access all of the useful data that we need. If the type of the ticket status response is the multiplay assignment, which is what we need, then we can just cast it into a variable, and after that there are multiple statuses that the multiplay assignment can have. So in case that it is the found, we just want to join the server. So we are doing this the same way as in the multiplay manager. We are first accessing the Unity transport so that we can then set the connection data. So we are taking the IP from the multiplay assignment and then the port also from the multiplay assignment. After that, we can just start the client and return from the function. We can also have a status of timeout, so in this case we also want to return so that we are not checking longer for the ticket status response. We can also have a status of failed, and if the status is in progress, we don't want to return so that it keeps just checking for the ticket status response. And this is all of the code that we need for the player to be able to join a server. But because when creating the player list, we are accessing the authentication service and we are also using some Unity services, we need to initialize Unity services and sign in. In the start function, I'm checking if we are not running on the Linux server, so this means that it is a user. In this case, we can initialize the Unity services and sign in. For that, I also needed to add using unityservices.core. I'm going to create the dedicated server build for Linux, upload it to multiplay, and we can try if it works. Before we play the game, you can't forget to assign the dropdown in the matchmaker manager, so I'll just select it from the network UI, the matchmaker, the dropdown, drag it here, and we can try playing it. So we can see the ticket was created, and now every second it should try to match the player. If there are 0 players playing your game and you are just starting these servers for the first time, it is likely that you will get a timeout, but if you try it for the second time, the player should be able to join. So you just need to warm up your servers and make sure that they are started and running. Otherwise, if you would want to prevent this from happening, in multiplayer you could set the minimum amount of servers so that always there are at least some servers running, but then you will be paying for them even though you are not really using them. Yep, we can see a timeout, so we can try again. So now if we try again, just after a few seconds, we should see that we are joined in the game. Yep, it took about 5 seconds, we are in the game, we can see the image was found, and we can do everything as usual, just walk around, kill some enemies, and so on. In the Unity Cloud, in the Matchmaker Overview tab, we can see there were 3 tickets just received, because this was just starting the server, but one was already matched, which is the one that actually joined us to the game. We can also select the specific pool, so let's see if it actually was in the easy mode where it should have been. And yep, we can see that this ticket was matched in the easy mode, and if we go into the hard mode there should be no tickets. Yep, that's right. But there is still one issue with the servers, and you can see that I'm not even playing the game, and if we go to the multiplayer dashboard, you can see that those 2 servers are still allocated, which is not what we want. So back to the matchmaker script, we just want to make sure that when there are no more players in the server, we can just deallocate it. Deallocating the server is really simple. I've just created 2 booleans so that we know if we currently are trying to deallocate the server, and also a deallocating cancellation token, so that when the server is already trying to deallocate, we have some cooldown of 60 seconds, and in this time when a player joins, we don't want it to deallocate, so that's why we have the cancellation token. In update, I'm checking if we are running it on a Linux server, otherwise we obviously don't want to deallocate the server. I'm checking if the amount of the connected clients is equal to 0, and we are not yet deallocating. In this case, we can say that we are deallocating, and the deallocation should not be cancelled, so the cancellation token is set to false. I'm running the deallocate function, which is really simple. It is just an asynchronous function that waits for 60 seconds, then it checks if it should still deallocate. If it should, we can just call application quit, which is the whole way how we can just deallocate a server. Otherwise, in the update, if there are some connected clients, we can say that we shouldn't be deallocating, and we can set the cancellation token to true, so that then when it gets to this part, it shouldn't quit. I have also added more deallocation logic for the client to make sure that he is disconnected correctly. So in the void on application quit, I'm checking if it is running on the client. If it is, we want to make sure that the client was actually connected. In this case, we should also call the shutdown function on the network manager, as well as just disconnect the client based on its ID. Before, I was trying to access the network manager in this function, just accessing it through the singleton, but this doesn't seem to work in the onApplicationQuit function, so I just had to save it into a variable. So we have a variable for the network manager, which I'm just caching on start. And to disconnect the client, we also need to get its ID, and this is why I needed to make the whole class inherit from network behavior instead than mono behavior. And to make sure that we can inherit from this class, we need to go back to Unity and add the network object to the matchmaking manager. So right now, even after about 10 minutes, in the multiplayer dashboard, we can see that these servers are still running, so let's upload the new build. If you see that these servers are being still allocated, you can just select the ID and you should be able to stop it manually. Again, we are successfully joined in the game, and when I turn it off, I have quit the game, and in the servers list, you can see that it is still being allocated, but after about 60 seconds, it should be again available, so deallocate it. Yep, we can see the server was deallocated, so Unity should no longer be charging us for it. And one last thing we should implement with Matchmaker are the backfill tickets, which means that even after the game has started, players will be still able to join it. To use the backfill, we obviously need to first initialize the Unity services, and because I am already doing this in the multiplayer manager, in the matchmaking manager, if it is Deallocating Server, so this is the else here, I'm just waiting while the service is either uninitialized or it is initializing. In this case, I'm just waiting, so after the Unity services has initialized, we can just continue and we don't need to initialize again. Otherwise, if you would not be initializing Unity services in the multiplayer manager, you can just call it here as usual. I'm saving the matchmaker service into a variable because later we will also need it in the onApplicationQuit function where we can't access it normally. Then to create the backfill ticket, we need to get the ID, which multiplayer already generates for us, so we are accessing a payload allocation which is holding bunch of useful information, where we can also get the backfill ticket ID. To access the multiplayer service, I needed to add Unity services.multiplayer, and I'm saving the payload allocation into a variable that you can see here, but the payload allocation is not actually a built-in type, so you have to add it manually. I have it down here. It is just this public class. So you need to make sure that when you are adding this class, you add all of the properties that it has here. And after we get the payload allocation, we can just save the backfill ticket ID that I'm also saving into a variable. The way that we can tell the matchmaker service that there are still some empty spaces on this server so more players can join is by approving the backfill ticket. We should be approving the backfill ticket once per second, so I'm doing this in the update. I'm checking if the backfill ticket exists, and I'm also checking if the number of the connected clients is less than the maximum amount of players, which for me is 4. If this is true, then I'm accessing the matchmaker service and approving the backfill ticket async. And after that, I'm again just waiting 1 second to make sure that all of this runs just once per second. And all of this other logic could run pretty much still on update, so you could put it in a separate function if you want. After we have approved the backfill ticket, we should also make sure that we update it when anything related to the matchmaking changes. So in my case, the only thing that can change is the amount of players. So I have those two functions, onPlayerConnected and onPlayerDisconnected. In both cases, I'm checking if it is running on a server. If it is, then we can update the backfill ticket. Here, I'm creating new list of type player. I'm going through all of the connected clients that are in the network manager. I'm grabbing their IDs, converting it to a string so that we can create new player object. We can pass in the player list into match properties, so you can just create this object, and then you can pass in the players, the backfill ticket ID, and also the teams and the region if you want. And then we can call the function to update the backfill ticket async, where we are passing the backfill ticket ID, creating new backfill ticket, which is again containing the ID, and into it we can pass in these backfill ticket properties, which need the match properties. And this is all for the backfilling. So as one of the players may have already joined and started the game, other players should be still able to join him. So again, I will upload the build and try to see if it works. On my first computer, I tried starting the game at the hard difficulty, and you can see that we successfully joined a server. On my second computer, I also tried running it on the hard difficulty, and we can see that we are running on the same server as where the first player is connected, so we can play together, everything works fine. And if I quit the game and join on the easy difficulty, you can see that we are running on a brand new server where we are alone. But this is only a small part of what you can do with Matchmaker. As I said, you can match players based on skill, based on latency, based on the game mode they are trying to play, based on the platform that they are using, and much more. And one thing that I was trying to figure out for a few hours was why can't I connect with the same player to the same server more times in a row. I went through a couple of forums, and the official Unity team has said that this is the intended behavior. The matchmaker is just trying to not connect the player to the same server where they have already been playing like few minutes ago. So if for some reason you would want to be able to connect the same server again, you would either have to remember the IP and the port and just join the dedicated server as we did in the last video, or you could join a lobby with other people and with them you could join the same server. And if you are worried about the pricing of Matchmaker, Matchmaker is free because it is relying on multiplay, and multiplay is paid. So without multiplay, it doesn't really make much of a sense to use Matchmaker on its own. By the way, this video took me about 2 hours to record, which is quite a lot, so if you found it useful, consider subscribing and liking this video. I hope that this video was useful. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to tell me down in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I will see you in next videos. Bye! Thanks for watching this video till the end. If you are looking for a Unity, C# or Bolt tutor, then I am here for you, so feel free to send me a message to my Gmail and take a look at my website for more info. I can help you with your personal projects or teach you anything about game development you would want to know. You are welcome.